Hey everyone, Dontaye Carter here with Beyond the Brand. And guess what? We're doing a shout out for our sponsorship. It's Anchor. And if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money on your podcast with no minimum membership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So go and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Peace.
This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand, Beyond the Brand, Beyond the Brand.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Beyond the Brand. And today I'm excited because, as you all know, I'm really huge on storytelling. I'm really huge on your why and what sets you apart in the marketplace. And I'm so grateful to have someone in here today who specializes on those exact things. Everybody, I want to introduce you to who I call the storyteller extraordinaire, Mrs. Debby Stone. Debbie, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, especially after that introduction.
Well, no. I always think back to when you came and you spoke at PRSA here in Georgia, and I was just so blown away. You really did a great job of breaking down how to tell your own stories, how to tell a story, how we can benefit our clients. And I remembered even just kind of looking at your book and thinking about, man, just that art of self-promotion, and it was just such a fitting title. And I was just always curious as to, for you, where did storytelling kind of come from?
So it's interesting. As I've reflected on that, I think I've always been a bit of a storyteller. I have a little bit of that entertainer in me. And so telling stories has come naturally to me. But it wasn't until I got into executive coaching back in the early 2000s that I started to realize how important storytelling was in the workplace. So it wasn't just about, did you do a good job doing your job? Were you competent? Did you get the work done? The people who were having the most extraordinary success were the ones who had figured out how to tell their stories, how to talk about themselves, how to share what it was that they were doing in a way that was compelling to other people. And so that really caught my attention because I thought, well, if I'm in the business of helping people be more successful, perhaps storytelling is that missing link. Yeah. And I really do believe it is. It's great to be good at what you do. It's imperative that we're all good at what we do. But just doing our jobs well is never enough. We've got to be able to make sure that people know our stories.
Yeah, and so speaking of our story, I want to hear a little bit about yours because you have such a distinguished resume that I want to just learn a little bit more because, you've been to law school, you've done all these amazing things. And so just, take us down that journey for you. And just up to the decision to go to law school to deciding to become an executive coach. Like, where did it all start?
I think I was always the student. I never was the sportswoman. I wasn't particularly gifted as an artist. And so I really focused all my attention growing up on being a good student. And that led me to think about what I wanted to do career-wise pretty early. And by the time I got to college, I had narrowed it down to either being a journalist or being a lawyer. And the thing I think that tied the two together for me was the idea that both of them involved asking a lot of questions. They both involved being able to tell stories persuasively and being able to be a good writer. So I went to college and really started out thinking I was going to go to law school. I took a little bit of a detour and I worked in management consulting for a couple of years after college. But at the time when all my colleagues and friends in the management consulting world went to business school, I did what I had set out to do and went back and got my law degree. Interestingly, though, because I had started doing management consulting, instead of getting into the storytelling aspect of law, which would have been litigation, I ended up in the corporate aspect of law. So I didn't actually tell companies or clients stories. I was what I have now jokingly referred to as a paper pusher. And I wrote contracts, and I negotiated contracts, and I did trademark work. And so I moved away really from that storytelling part. But what I found over time was the part of law that I loved was the part where I got to hear client stories at the beginning of an engagement. I got to learn about who they were as people. Many of my clients were entrepreneurs who were starting their own businesses or had started their own businesses. And I loved hearing how they got to where they were, what was their idea, what were their goals, where were they headed. And that was the part of practicing law that I liked. And what I realized as I was really pretty deep into a successful law career was that the part I didn't like was the part that I actually got paid for, which was drafting and negotiating documents.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, I don't want to be doing this when I turn 50. I better do something soon. And that's when I turned to the world of coaching.
Wow. And so you get into the world of coaching, and, you know, what's it like for you?
Oh, it's funny. I started coaching in 2002. I had met some people who were coaches, and I was really intrigued by what they got to do as their job. They told me that their job was to talk to people and listen to their stories and learn about their goals and help them achieve those goals. And I thought, wow, that sounds dead on what I would love to do, and the part that I've loved about what I've been doing. The interesting thing was that coaching was still kind of a baby profession back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So I often got asked when I would say I was a coach, people would say, "Oh, really? What sport?" And if you were seeing me right now, as you probably remember, I am 5 feet on a good day, and so I would look up at whoever, and I always had to look up, and I would, with a very straight face, say, "Basketball." And watch them try to figure that one out. And I would say, no, seriously. I'm a coach. I work with leaders. I work with entrepreneurs. I work with people in the professional world who want to do their jobs better. So it was really fulfilling work. But at the beginning, it was a little bit of an uphill battle, just educating people on what coaching was all about. So in that regard, it was a great lesson for me in the importance of being able to tell my story. I had to be credible as a coach, and I had all this credibility as a lawyer, but as a brand new coach, as all of us when we're brand new at something, it's like, well, why are you credible as a coach? And to figure out what that was, and then to get people interested in what coaching could do for them.
Yeah. So when you're going into coaching and you're talking to individuals about that art of self-promotion, telling your story, transforming their career, what are some of those key components of storytelling that you really want them to focus on?
So people need to know themselves. And so I always say to people, get to understand who you are as a person. What are you good at? What have you accomplished? What are your passions? Why do you do what you do? You know, it's so appealing when we work with somebody who's passionate about what they do. And so in the book, I take people through a series of exercises to help them excavate these parts of themselves, because most of us don't spend a lot of time thinking and reflecting. But you need to do that if you're going to be a good storyteller. And all of those little components really tie back to two key concepts that I talk about whenever I'm talking about this, which is that as a storyteller, you have two major goals. You, at least initially, have two things that you want to always accomplish. And that is to establish or reinforce your credibility, because we all like to listen to people that we think are credible. Yeah. And second, that you have to make your listener curious to want to know more about you. You have to have something that hooks them into wanting to hear more about you.
And so let's take it a little deeper, because, folks, they always ask the question of, well, how do I do that? What is that next step that you go into really breaking that down? Because I know for me, when I'm sitting down and talking to folks, it's kind of it. Folks are at the point now where they understand why they need to tell their story, but getting to that how, being able to pull out those smaller details, become the hardest parts for them.
Yeah. So it goes back to reflecting. This is not something you can really figure out how to do on the fly. So I always say you want to invest as much time in preparing to tell your story as you would in getting ready to present some findings on work that you've done in the office, or if you're putting together some sort of a report in school. So this is work to do in advance. And it's thinking about what are your strengths, what are those things that you're complimented for, that you realize are easy for you. And for most of us, what we say to ourselves is, well, isn't everybody good at that?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. You have unique things that you're good at. Yeah. What are those things? So that's one component. Another key component is thinking about what your accomplishments are. As high achievers, what I find is that most people achieve things all the time, but they're not always big things. And so in the course of a day, you might accomplish a great deal, but you may think of it as, I just do that because that's my job. Check the box, move on.
Yeah.
So quick story about accomplishing things. I was talking with a client quite recently who's a general counsel in an organization. So head lawyer, VP in the organization. So a big job. And she's accomplishing things all the time and is incredibly busy and productive. But she had a conversation with the president of her organization, and the president said that really she, the president, didn't know what my client, the general counsel, was doing. And as a result, when she would get asked by the executive committee or the board, hey, what's so-and-so doing? We have to justify her salary. It doesn't seem like she's as productive as she could be. We need more. The president did not have the ability to defend her and to essentially go to bat for my client. So my client realized she had to do a better job of telling her story and sharing what she was accomplishing regularly with the president so that the president could have her back.
Yeah. And, one of the things, even I was just thinking back to PRSA when you handed us those sheets. And I remembered flipping over and you had 5 lines, and it was just finding those adjectives that best describe you. And I remember sitting there and struggling because a lot of times for me, it's, I know what I do. I know what my story is, but I don't necessarily all the time think about those adjectives that even really best describe me. It's kind of like, with your client, just being able to share those stories about what she does and being able to justify her salary. It's like, man, what are the key things that when I'm speaking to people that I can, those 5 adjectives that I can come to of, I'm X, Y, and Z. And it's just, and those are one of the things that for me, I really enjoyed about just having that glimpse into your coaching, was it was just so in depth, and being able to understand that it's so much deeper than, hi, my name's Dontaye, I'm from Orlando, I do PR. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I just really enjoy that. I'm sorry.
And it's so interesting because if you said, hi, my name is Dontaye, I'm from Orlando, I do PR, you would have fulfilled what most people think of as essentially the elevator speech, right?
Yeah.
You've given us the basic information about you, and that's fine. It's not bad, but it doesn't actually get me to ask you the next question. It's when I hear something like that, hi, I'm Debby. I have been in Atlanta for many, many years. I have a company called Novateur Partners, and I'm an executive coach. Well, okay. You've learned something about me, but it doesn't get you interested in continuing to learn more or have a conversation with me necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's that essence of what it is that you bring, and then also bringing your personality. We haven't talked about this yet, but to me, the authenticity piece of all of this and the confidence piece is so important. So it's how it's what story you tell, but it's how you tell your story that is equally as important.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so funny because I think about what are the stories that I can tell that show that I know I have experience in what I'm doing, but also show some humor, really keeping people engaged, and then allowing them to take something away from that story. And I just think sometimes I've got some of these stories, but I'm not always the most confident when it comes to sharing them. How do you help some of your folks peel back those layers when it comes to identifying the story that shows the traits that they need to really spotlight when they're speaking or when they're working with other folks?
So you've hit on a couple of really important things. You mentioned humor, which is about really being authentically you. I think so often when we're telling our stories, we think we have to do it in a way that makes us look professional. And you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes around that. How do I sound more professional? How do I be more of who people expect me to be? And the more we get into that inside of our own heads, then the less confident and comfortable we're going to come off when we're telling our stories. And so if humor is natural, then humor's great. If humor is like, I'm going to think about a joke I can tell because I think people want me to be humorous, then it's going to really come off uncomfortably for everybody. So when I'm working with someone and helping them tell their story, we start with helping them really tell their stories in their own voices. One of the things I often say when I'm talking about this is that you can write something out, and when you read it in print, it'll read beautifully. Like, wow, that's a great paragraph about Dontaye. But if Dontaye, tried to say it the way you wrote it, you probably would come off sounding like some sort of odd robot, or as if you had memorized the lines of a TV show. And that is not going to land well with people. So we have to tell our stories the way we actually talk.
Yeah. And that was one of those things that I know for me, just early on in my career, that I really struggled with, finding those stories that really capture, even the small things such as my cadence. And there's so many times where I can write out a beautiful story. I can send somebody over, hey, this is a story that I wrote, but it may not necessarily even be the same story that, if I was publicly speaking, that I would share, because it just, I don't know, just even the small things such as that cadence, like to me that matters. And just being able to know, this is the type of inflection that I'll even have in my voice when I'm speaking. So it's just so many different things. And that's why I don't even know how you capture the full essence of storytelling, over a podcast. I think you can really lay down some amazing notes and some pointers, but it's just it's really a deep field, and there's so much depth to it. What were some of the challenges that you've kind of had when really putting your book together and really making sure that you could capture the full essence of storytelling?
Many challenges, because you're right. It's a big subject. And so for me, initially, I had to think about what's the context that I'm putting these stories in.
Yeah.
And because of the experience that I have as an executive coach, I'm putting storytelling in the context of how do you improve your career path. So there are lots of other reasons to tell stories. If first and foremost, stories to me are what connect us as people.
Yeah.
And so just to have better interpersonal relationships, storytelling is critical. But I had to narrow that down. And with when I wrote the book would probably tell you that I could have narrowed it down even further, but I wasn't willing to do it. So the book covers storytelling in a few different contexts. And it was, a challenge to me to think about then what are the key things that tie all those together. And it's really just making a better career path. But you need to be able to tell your story when you're interviewing for a job. You need to be able to tell your story effectively when you're building a network, because you're developing clients or building a business or simply want to have an expanded business network. You need to be able to tell your story when you are in your performance review, if you work for a company. And you need to be able to tell your story as you move through your workday, sort of seamlessly, just to build your brand internally, much like the general counsel that I just mentioned to you. Yeah. So it was a challenge to me to kind of frame up, all right, what are the concepts that tie all of those things together? And it started with this idea that when you first start to talk with someone and you're sharing your story, you only have about 20 seconds to capture their attention. So, and it's not that you only have 20 seconds to tell your whole story, so you want to speed up and talk like an auctioneer. It's not that. But it is that in those first 20 seconds, people are making a decision about whether they want to continue the conversation. And what do they want to get out of the conversation. Yeah. So that initial bit is so important. And I always talk with clients about, going back to, hi, I'm Dontaye, I'm from Orlando, and I'm in PR. That's not going to be your most compelling use of your 20 seconds if you want the conversation to continue.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How do you feel about winging it a little bit? Some winging questions, some that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, let's go.
So, and I brought up the winging it is because I actually forgot about a few questions that I had. And they all came out of our initial conversation last week. And so
great.
I was, when you actually peel back some of the layers, it really impressed me. When you talked about building this career, doing it as a single mom and just all that you had to juggle, I sit back and it is so, with my wife being at the hospitals with Corona and me having my daughter all the time, I'm like, oh, this is a lot, but I've never had to carry that burden all on my own. What was that like for you? Because I just think it's so inspiring just being able to hear those stories of just being able to overcome such huge obstacles.
Well, thank you. And first and foremost, I'll say it was exhausting. I mean, I won't lie. It's a lot. Yeah. And so the part that I don't often talk about and haven't shared with you, so I'll spring something on you too, is that when my son, who's now 27, was young, he had significant medical and health issues.
Oh, wow.
So I was juggling that as well. And so it was a combination of a couple of things that really drove me. One was just the desire to be with people and help people. And one of the reasons I got out of law was because even though intellectually I knew that the work that I did helped people, it didn't feel that way. So I knew it in my head, but I couldn't feel it in my heart.
Yeah.
And having gone through and going through everything that I went through when he was young and when I was single and all of that, I wanted to have a job that I knew and really felt made a difference in the lives of people around me every day. I thought a lot about legacy and about how we don't know how long we have, and all of that, which sounds perhaps a bit morbid, really just spoke to me and said, we only get one time as far as we all know, and what is it that I want to do with it? Yeah. And once I figured out that this was what I wanted to do, I was then fueled with a passion that gave me the energy to work hard and build the business. I did a lot of work in the evening, and I would juggle when I would pick my son up from school or from an after-school activity. And, I remember when he was young one summer and he was hanging around the house, and I remember he was, asking, could we do this? Could we do that? And I remember I said, I will finish my work a lot quicker if you do the things around the house that are yours to do. and he was old enough, 8 or 9 years old, where he had some chores. And I said, if mom ends up doing all your chores too, then I'm not going to be available for that much longer. So we got to do this as a team. And everybody needs a team, for sure. I had a great team around me, which was always helpful. Family and friends who helped.
No, that is awesome. It's always great. I know it's great for me even to hear about the things that help you to get up in the morning, that keep you motivated, that keep you invigorated, because as you know, just building a business, running a business, it can take a lot out of you, especially if you have, other things as being a single parent and raising your son. Those are so awesome. And it's so funny because it just, as you were saying that, I was like, so that kind of leads into my second question of just even with the working with the families of children under stress. I just even wanted to know about that and know why. A lot of it sounds like it came from that, from just raising your son. But, I know there's so much more you can add to that.
Yeah, so Focus, Families of Children Under Stress, is a local nonprofit that supports families that have chronically ill or disabled children. And when my son was small, he, again, was quite sick. And so when he was in the hospital, Focus asked one of their volunteers to come and just visit with me and see what kind of support I might need as a mom. And so we got to know each other. I got involved in Focus as a supported parent. And then as my son got older, I wanted to get more involved on the other side and give back. So ultimately, I was on the board for a number of years. I headed up the board for a term and was able to give back to the organization because I was so supported by the great work that they do. They do a lot of support groups for parents who are dealing with things that, as parents, it's not what you signed up for, or at least you didn't think that was what you were signing up for.
Yeah.
And it's an unknown world. And they do respite care for some of the kids. They provide summer camps for kids with special needs. It's just a wonderful organization. And I'm really grateful for their support and for the opportunity to be able to be involved, give back on the back end.
Yeah. No, that is, wow. And I appreciate you being just so transparent about those struggles, because it really just adds context to not just your character, but even the work that you're doing and the impact that you're able to make. And, I sit back sometimes, and my wife, she's done a great job of educating me on just so many different issues. She's been extremely patient with me. And every time that I'm cognizant of her patience, I make sure to let her know that I appreciate it, because it has been a little bit of a journey in terms of that understanding. But just seeing things from her side, just being a female doctor, running her own practice, just all those things. And I love when I hear her say, I go as hard as I do because I want our little girl to know that, the road's not going to be easy. But you know what? If you put the work in, you can make it. And I sit back. And so it's really changed just my viewpoint of seeing women such as my wife and you, who are leading businesses, who are really carving out their own legacies and making an impact for not making an impact, but also leaving a legacy that young girls can look up to and follow. What does that mean for you?
That means the world for me. So I don't have a daughter. And at the same time, I hope that the work that all of us are doing, your wife and the other women leaders out there, people who own businesses, that work that we're doing means that the little girls like yours of the world will have a whole different set of opportunities than even we had coming up, because we were the first, certainly my generation, and I'm older than your wife, we were the first where there were real options. It wasn't, well, you're a girl, do you want to be a nurse or a teacher? We had all the options theoretically, but at the same time, we weren't super encouraged to get into medicine necessarily. We were still, it was early in terms of making inroads. And what we're finding now is that, and I work with a lot of women leaders, I'm very passionate about this, is that while women are graduating from college at the same rate as, if not more so these days, as men, when you look at the C-suite in companies, when you look at the top leadership in organizations, in nonprofits, in states, in government, it's still incredibly male-dominated. And so things like what you're talking about have a lot of meaning to me, because my hope is that at some point women will be represented in the same way at the highest levels as we are at the college graduate levels.
Yeah. And that's why, I kind of threw in there, when I'm just cognizant of it, because I just feel like so often it's so easy to just look and think, we've all got a shot at this, without really acknowledging those obstacles that you mentioned. And I even remember speaking to one of my mentors. She owns a PR firm, and it's just, it's the little things that for me that sometimes I don't think of because I haven't had to face them. But I remember we were just sitting down talking, and I think an alert flashed about Harvey Weinstein, and I showed it to her and I asked her about it, and she said, "You know what?" She said, "I would go bananas just describing the stuff that I had to go through just coming up the ladder." And she said, it's frustrating. And she said, I'm so glad that I was able to make it here, but I just hope that the next generation of women don't have to deal with that. And like I said, she's much older than me. But in my mind, I was just like, wow, for these occurrences, and I'm really glad that they're out in the forefront, because it does give, men like me an opportunity to have these conversations with, many of my fellow colleagues about, conduct. But, it just makes me appreciate you, my wife, and so many other female business owners and leaders just so much more, really understanding that it hasn't been an easy road. And so I did want to share that with you, because I was, I've sat back and I've read your bio, I've gone through your book. I remember going through some of the worksheets that you gave us, and there's such a wealth of knowledge. I know it wasn't easy, but I appreciate just you, what you've been able to build, and the service that you've been able to provide as well.
Thank you. That all really touches me, and it makes me think about, in so many ways we've all come so far, and there are so many of our biases and sort of past beliefs that we seem to have overcome as a society. And at the same time, there are so many things we still have to overcome. And, for you as a person of color, for your wife as a woman of color, there's all of that we're still dealing with as a society too. Yeah. So, again, thinking about legacy that we all, are working on. I know a lot of the work you do is designed around justice, and that concept as a former practicing lawyer is certainly of appeal to me. But just for all of us to think about, we have so much more that unites us than makes us different. And how do we get past all those things that are traditionally, you're a man, you're a woman, you're a person of color, you're not, you're from this faith, you're from a different faith, all the things that we make up that get in our way.
Yeah. And that's why I just love just storytelling and just being able to share it, because it just seems like a well-told story will break down so many barriers in an instant. And so, when folks ask, well, why is being able to tell my story so valuable? I mean, you tell the story right, and you can connect with so many people on so many different levels. And the more that you can connect with people, the more you can grow your brand, the more that you can be able to take your company to the place where you want to get it. And it's just so much here. And so when I even think about the value of this conversation that we're able to have, it's so immense for me, because I know that when folks listen to it, it's going to give them a brand new perspective on not just their stories, but the stories of the people around them. And I mean, at the end of the day, back to your point, though, that's what connects us, are the stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know with your background, in journalism, you know how important it is when you tell a story right. It really lands with people, and it creates that connection. And one of the things I say so often that I'm sure some of my clients are tired of hearing it is that it's those personal connections that's how business is done.
Yeah.
It's not about a transaction. It's about a relationship. And so often we put too much of our stock in just getting the thing done. And can you help me get the thing done? And we really need to be focused on what's the relationship between the two of us. And once we have that established, the thing will get done. Yeah. And it will get done a whole lot quicker and easier and better.
Oh, that is so true. So let me ask you this. We've spoken about it a little bit, but for you, when you think about your legacy, what do you want that to be?
Ooh, Jason, a big question for me. Deep in the interview. So, gosh, when I think about how I want to be remembered, I want first and foremost to be remembered as someone who had an impact on people because I cared and I listened. And to me, that's among the most important things as a human that we can do, that caring, that feeling of compassion and empathy and love that we can give to other people. And then listening, because most of us don't ever really get listened to in our life for very long at all. Yeah. It's an important thing to be able to give to someone else, is to have someone who is dedicated to listening to, and not just to hearing the words, but to listening at that deeper level for someone else. And my great hope is that through caring and listening, that the work that I do, my writing, my speaking, my coaching, will help to change the environment in which people work. Wow. And make it a more humane place. And I think of it like a big lake, and I'm throwing little teeny tiny pebbles into the lake when I do my work. But at some point, the ripples are going to get big and maybe make some waves.
Wow.
It is something I've thought about.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I just, again, I love great stories. I love hearing the purpose behind what people do. And, just knowing that there's so much there that you still want to do and how you want to be remembered. I mean, it's just, impact is everything. And, I'm grateful that you were able to come onto our show. And I know this is going to impact a lot of our listeners. And I'm just so grateful that you were able to come here and just share your knowledge, share your wisdom, and share your why.
Well, I am incredibly grateful to you for having me and asking me good questions, and really just for the work that you are doing out in the world and in your own home, supporting your wife, doing your business, taking care of your daughter, and raising her to be a strong woman.
Yeah.
So applause back.
I'm trying. It's been a process and a lot of learning.
That's what parenting is all about.
So yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone that's joined us today, thank you again. And hey, you can check us again next week right here on Beyond the Brand.
This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand.